4 very different games across 4 very different consoles, all sharing one identity. Power Rangers the movie. But one is a fraud, and it's my job to sniff out the perp. Limited visuals, a cheap and easy cash grab. The Game Boy version seemed like the obvious choice. A lot of portable games just are like that. It is the nature of the beast. But you know what they say about books and covers. Turns out it was on the up and up. Review that evidence if you haven't already, but that doesn't mean my hunch was wrong. After all, the Game Boy version wasn't the only portable game. Now was it? Developed by Sims and published by Sega and Banpresto, of all of our suspects, the Gamegear version is the most like its predecessor. In fact, they're pretty much the same game. Same menu, same controls, and mostly the same visuals and animations, reusing a lot of the same sprites. And being released only a year after the first game, is it really that surprising? But more importantly, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because if you'll recall, I did call that game a hidden gem. And with the exception of the fact that none of the backgrounds resemble the movie, seriously, you guys couldn't make any of these scenes at night? The game still looks fantastic, especially for its time. Bright and colorful, plus the Ranger animations are still pretty badass. And even better, this version is rocking all of the iconic Power Ranger tunes in all their Big Crush glory, which is more than can be said for its Nintendo counterpart. So it's definitely got that Mighty Morphin presentation on lock. But it's the take on the combat that really makes it stand out. Once again, we are dealing with a tournament fighter, with action game elements just squeezed in, mostly in favor of staying true to the series, which is always appreciated. Nothing suspicious yet. The easiest example of this can be found in the Versus mode, which, hell yeah, you can link up 2 Game Gears via link cable to square off against friends. Though, let's be honest here, who actually has a Game Gear link cable? Oh, I have definitely got one around here somewhere. And friends? Luckily for us, the Versus mode can be played against computers, where we actually find that we can play as either the Rangers, the Zords, or even the monsters. However, whatever gets picked first limits the other options. Rangers can only battle against monsters and other Rangers, Zords can only fight against monsters and other Zords, and it turns out that monsters are pretty easy, so they'll fight against anyone. So overall, a limitation born out of faithfulness to the show. Assuming you ignore these. Well, it didn't happen in the movie, so I'll let it pass. But I'm watching you. Otherwise, the Versus mode is your traditional 1v1 best 2 out of 3 fighter, and a pretty solid one at that. Well, not exactly brimming with counters and combos, come on, this isn't Street Fighter 2. Combat is fast. Both you and your opponent are going to be zipping all around the battlefield, as every character feels pretty light despite their size. And yes, that includes the giant robots. But what's really surprising is just how large an arsenal you actually have, considering that this is a 2-button fighter. You have ground attacks, aerial attacks, and running attacks for both buttons, as well as when you hit them at the same time. The same goes for the quarter circle specials. And if you go ahead and just shift your gaze up here for a moment, see this lightning bolt? When it starts flashing, you can pull off a super move. That, despite my investigative talents, that I could never pull off reliably. Now, regardless of which mode you choose, combat is relatively the same. But it's the main campaign that actually adds in an interesting twist, and is the main draw. Jumping right into the story mode, we open up exactly how you'd expect. Or not. It would seem that, regardless of which version I investigate, I continue to find evidence, some more damning than others, that the devs either weren't privy to all the details of the movie, as the timelines of development do overlap, classic movie tie-in issues, or they just didn't have enough material to adapt, which I seriously doubt, since the Tengu and Rock Warriors got axed. Lame. Though the most likely culprit here is that at least half of the movie games started out as regular Season 2 Power Ranger titles before having to be workshopped into movie games. Because, well, you know. Case in point, the first 3 stages start out exactly the same. And I do mean exactly the same. Just with different monsters. But that's all smoke and mirrors. A clever ruse, if you will. Don't be fooled. Because just as soon as you start to wear down your opponent, you'll discover that this isn't your typical 1v1, as the monster beelines out of there as soon as the going gets tough. Enter the putties. Throughout the fight, you'll find yourself alternating between fighting the monster and the minions, as they pop in and out of the fight in order to weaken you. Now, keep in mind that these fights are always still just one-on-ones. But it's how they enter the fray and escape that gives off the illusion that you're fighting a group of them, which is actually pretty cool. And, in all fairness, each minion you drop restores a teeny bit of health, so you can actually use this to your advantage. But, despite their looks, these goofballs aren't pushovers. Once the monster's health bar finally hits 0, in classic Power Rangers tradition, it's time for my monster to grow! Making yet another solid case for its Power Ranger roots, it is time for the Zord battle. But this time around, it's a little bit of a letdown. In the previous title, once the Green Ranger is beaten and joins up, in the Zord fights, you could choose between the Megazord, Dragon Zord, or Mega Dragon Zord. But not here. Despite having the White Ranger from the get-go, all you've got is the Thunder Megazord. Weak. That is, of course, until Stage 4, where everything changes.
When the ocean attacked.
When all of a sudden, out of nowhere, basically at the halfway point of the game, it remembers, oh right, I'm supposed to be based on the movie. Look, actual cutscenes. But it's more than just the presentation that makes a change up. The fight monster then giant monster fight scenario also gets dropped in favor of more movie themed battles, including a gauntlet against the Oozemen and multiple fights as the Ninja Megazord against the Ectomorphicons. So the beginning and end of the movie at the middle and end of the game. You know what? Sure, why not? It makes its case. All of which rounds out to about 30 minutes. So twice as long as the Gamegear's batteries. Assuming, of course, you can beat it all in one go. It's not exactly hard, but I definitely struggled with this game a lot as a kid, and I still found myself getting popped a couple of times even now. But with 6 continues, it never really feels unfair. Like its predecessor, Power Rangers the movie on Gamegear is a fun little gem that is absolutely worth checking out if you get the chance, though the first game is better, so try that one first. But unfortunately though, as of this investigation, it's still stuck on said Gamegear, so I really wouldn't break the bank for it.